Okay, today's daf, Bez Hashem, is Masechta Sanhedrin 69, Samach Tes. As we move quite along over here, and we are discussing, we're going to say, Upligid the Rabbah. Let us discuss what Rav Chizda said. Rav Chizda said, and what we're discussing today is a very, I tried to look to Google this. I mean, is it possible for someone, a child, to father another kid, to father a child? So Reb Chizda said, it says in the pasuk, Yel ish bein, that if a man has a son who is a Sayer or Moira, so from that the Torah tells you that he has to be an adult man that has a child. But if it was a child, let's say a 9-year-old or 10-year-old had a boy, okay, and that child grows up, since when he had him, the child was the father was a child. When he was born, the father was a child. So that child can never become a Sarah Moira. So Rav Chizda's scientific understanding is that as someone who is under bar mitzvah could father a child. So we're holding Samaches Amid Beis about 2 lines from the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom. Upligi de Rabbah. So Rav Chizda is arguing against Rabbah. The Amar Rabbah said clearly, Kotan Eina Moilid. A Kotan, someone who's under bar mitzvah, he cannot father a child. Shenama, Pasuk says, Im Ein Ish Goyel. The Torah is talking about a ger that dies and what happens to his assets. So if it goes to the Kahanim. So Ein Ish Goyel, if a man has no living relative, so that's what the pasuk is talking about. So the Gemaraisa asks, is it possible to have a Jew that has no living relatives? Every Jew has a living relative, and that living relative should inherit the assets of the person who died. Ella, we're referring to Begezel Hager HaKosem Medaber. The Torah is talking about a ger that died. Hi, Sheldon. We just began,
Okay.
and we're discussing here a scientific machlokes between Rav Chizda and Rabbah, where Rav Chizda said that it's possible for someone who's under bar mitzvah to father a child, and Rabbah said it's impossible. And so Rabbah proved his point from here. It says that by a ger that dies, so the Torah tells you have to research that perhaps he fathered a child. The Amar Rachmana, the Torah tells you, because if he fathered a child, then his of course child will get his inheritance, and if he doesn't, then then it's a free for all. Whoever wants to, the possessions of a ger can be for anybody. But v'amar Rachmana ish, if the ger was an adult male that died, so ish at the tzarach lachzor olav im yesh olav goyelim, for if he was an adult male that died, then you have to research to maybe he fathered a child, and therefore you have to research to see maybe he married somebody you didn't know about it. You can't just run into his property and possess it. Vimlav, if it was a ger that was a katan, okay, if a ger was a katan and died, so he was under bar mitzvah and he died, and he had money, maybe he was a waiter, maybe he had a job, and he became a ger. Maybe on his own he could become a ger, even though he's a katan. Taisa speaks about that. So, but if he was a katan that died, so a kid who's a ger, who's like 12 years old and dies, so the Torah is telling you that you don't have to research if he had a child. We know for a fact he has no relatives, because since he was under bar mitzvah, he obviously did not father a child. So again, we have a machlokes between Rabbah and Rav Chizda, whereas Rav Chizda said a person under bar mitzvah could father a child, and Rabbah said it's impossible. His semen, he doesn't have enough potent semen to be able to father a child. So Eisvei Abaya asked the question, we're going to see that a katan could have intimate relations with a woman. Why? Because the pasuk says, Abaya says, ish. The Torah tells you that if a man has relations with a shivcha charufa, we're not going to discuss what that is, but basically it's a it's a shivcha kananis that's dedicated, part shivcha kananis, part free person that's dedicated to a Eved Ivri. Eved Ivri could marry a Goyish shiksa, as you know. A Jewish slave could marry a shiksa. So the pasuk says that if a person over bar mitzvah has relations with that lady, so then he brings a carbon, and the woman gets malchus. The ainli el ish. How do I know if it's only a man that has relations? Then the woman will get malchus. Ben tashon v'yam echad shoroi l'biyam anayin. How do you know a 9-year-old that has relations with this lady that the lady will get malchus? Talmud loyme v'ish. The extra vav tells you that even a katan who has relations with the lady will cause her to receive lashes for her violation because she is she's dedicated to be married to an Eved Ivri. The point being is that you see a kid under bar mitzvah could have relations. Amalei. So Rabbah answers, that's not a question against me. Yesh loy. Of course he could have relations. V'einay moilid, but he he doesn't have enough semen to father a child. So he could have relations with a woman, but he doesn't have the ability to father a child. It's like a piece of wheat that didn't ripen a third. So it may have a seed inside, but it doesn't. That seed will not grow a plant. The Bei Rab Chizkiya Tani in the yeshiva of Rab Chizkiya, they had a brisa that says the Torah could have said if a man does an evil action and kills his friend, but the Torah says v'chi yazid ish, if a man cooks up. So what does that mean? So ish mezid umasriya, the ein cotton mezid umasriya. The Beir of Chizkiya has a brisa that supports Rabbah, which says that a man, only if you're over bar mitzvah, you can cook up shichva zera, you could cook up semen, and umasriya, and you can impregnate somebody. The ein cotton mezid umasriya, but someone under bar mitzvah cannot do that. So the word yazid is the one that says yazid-ish. Only a person who's over by mitzvah could do yazid, cook it up, semen to be able to have enough sperm to father a child. Amalei Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi, my mashma the high mezid lishn de beshulihi. How do you know that the word yazid means to cook? Answers the Gemara, the ksiv, the yazid Yaakov nazid. Yaakov cooked up a dish. So we see that the word yazid means cooking. So yazid, nazid, yazid-ish means that only a man over a boy over bar mitzvah could father a child. Now, says the Gemara, I'm going to prove to you that from the brises, it seems to say that a kid who's under bar mitzvah could father a child. Because Vatanid Bei Rabbi Shmuel, the brisa of Rabbi Shmuel taught, Bein v'loy av. That means that the Ben Sora Mora has to be just a boy, but he cannot have fathered a child. That boy cannot have fathered a child. Now, we know a Ben Sora Mora is from 13 until he has enough pubic hairs to cover his genitals. Now, that's the period. From the time that you're 13 to the time that you have enough hair, it's called Zakin Hatacht. So, hey Chedamit. What do you mean? How is it possible that he had enough time to be over bar mitzvah, he was 13, and father a child? If we're talking about that he must have fathered a child after he turned bar mitzvah, and before his pubic hair filled up, in other words, he turned bar mitzvah, fathered a child. So let's say he's 13 years old and 9 months, right? Now, the Torah tells you because he fathered a child, he can never become Ben Sarah Mara. So, Mi Ika Shah is Kulehai. Is the Ben Sarah Mora, does it take so long? I mean, is there such a period of time where a person can become a Ben Sarah Mora from 13 and 9 months? That's not true. You have to remember this. Kol Yom of Ben Sarah Mara, the window of opportunity to become a Ben Sarah Mara, there's only 3 months. So it's from 13 years old to 13 and 3 months. So how is it that this Ben Saramara at age 13 and 1 month, let's say, fathered a child? If you're telling me that you can't father a child, you don't have enough sperm unless you're 13 years old. Elalav, it must be that the Bey Rabbi Shmuel, the Brisa Rabbi Shmuel, who's a Tana, must hold the Abba Mekamed Leishish Tesharis, V'oilid Mekamed Lakav Zokin. He must have fathered a child when he was 9 years old, or 10 years old, or 12 years old. But he fathered the child prior to him turning 13. Ushma Minot, from here we can derive Katan Mailid. From this brisa, we can see, not like Rabbah, that someone under bar mitzvah could have a child, father a child. And says the Gemara, not so. La'olam the Abba boss of the Isis shtei. It's talking about after he brought two saras. V'oilid boss of the and really he could have a child, and he had a child at 13 and 9 months, let's say, right? And your question is, but Rav Kusdai says you can only be a Ben Sar or a Moira from 13 to 13 and 3 months. It doesn't mean you actually fathered a child. It means you have potential to father a child whereby you can actually see that he impregnated somebody, and that somebody is 3 months pregnant. That's what Rabbi Spadai meant. Not somebody who could be called an av. So really, under bar mitzvah, you can't impregnate a woman. And what we need the mir is like this: that if a ben Sarah Mara impregnated somebody, so that woman could potentially by 13 and 3 months show that she's somewhat pregnant, that boy cannot become a ben Sarah Mara. That's what it says. Not that he actually had a child, but he has potentially to impregnate somebody to have a child. Let's discuss what Rav Kusbedoy said, because this throws a monkey wrench to the whole thing. You're always of the opinion that a person who is a Ben Sarah Mara is from his bar mitzvah age till he has all the pubic hairs by his genitals. But Rav Kusbedoy said that it's only for 3 months. So how do you explain this? Amar Rav Kusbedoy, Amar Rav Shapsei, Kol Yom of Ben Sarah Mara, the window of a Ben Sarah Mara, it's only a 3 month window. So till 13 and 3 months, says the Gemara, but didn't we learn in our Mishnah, doesn't mean that when he brings 2 hairs, until all the pubic hairs fill out, which can be probably much longer, generally, than 13 and 3 months. It might take till he's 14. So how do you square off the Mishnah and what Rab Kruspadai said? And says the Gemara, Hiskiv Zakin after Loim Molich Gimel Chadashim. What the Mishnah is teaching you, that if he had his hick of Zakin, if he has the pubic hairs, and it's fill, then even though he didn't finish the 3 months, he can't be a Ben Sarah Mara. So if after 1 month he already shows puberty, so then he's not a Ben Sarah Mara. But Moli Gimel Chadashim Alpha Gavdala Hikav. But even if he didn't show puberty, but if it's 3 months, then he still cannot become a Saramara. So basically, the window is really tight for a Ben Saramara. It's 13 to 13 and 3 months. And that squares it off with our Mishnah. Yosef Rabbi Yaakov Nahar Pekoid Kamei de Ravina. Rabbi Yaakov was sitting in front of Ravina. Yosef Kamem Shmei de Rav Huna. And Rabbi Yaakov was saying in the name of Rabbi Hum de Rav Yeshua, Shma Minomik Rab de Kuspedoi, if you can derive from the statement of Rav Kuspedoi, Amar Rab Shapsi, Yoledus Lashiva, Ein Ibora Nikas Shlosh Yemel. Somebody who's pregnant, who's giving birth after 7 months, would you say, generally speaking, a woman that's 9 months pregnant, after 3 months, she already shows, sign that she's pregnant. A woman that's 7 months going to give birth, let's say she's a woman that could give birth in 7 months, then when does she show that she's pregnant? According to Rab Kursudai, since there's a uniform term of 3 months, so ein ibura nikra l'shlosh. That means for a third of 7, let's say 2 months and 2 years and 2 months, and 3 months and 4 months, we're not going to say a Yaledis L'Shiva. A Yaledis L'Shiva will have a shorter time span. The Yisal Kedaitich Ubor Niklish Shemel, Lamali Gimel, Besutre, Vitlisasag, it should be enough with 2 1/3 of a year, should be enough. In other words, what he's trying to ask is like this: how could you say that every Ben Sarah Mara has to be 13 years old and 3 months? Why? Because potentially he can be a father that can show a woman that's pregnant after 3 months. If he pregnated her at age 13, then after 3 months she shows pregnancy. Well, potentially he can pregnate a woman, and after 2 1/3 month, she'll show a baby. So let's make the time period shorter for Ben Sarah Amora. It's 13 years and 2 months and a third. Why do we stretch it out to 13 years and 3 months? It must be that even a woman that's giving birth in 7 months, she's not going to show that she's pregnant until she's actually 3 months. That's what he wanted to say, what Rav Yaakov said. Amalei, so they told him back, Ravina told him back, I will tell you that a woman, even a woman that's giving birth after 3 months, is you can tell after a third of the way through, if a third of the way through to 7 months, she could tell that she's pregnant. But most women are giving birth after 9 months, and that's why the period of a Ben Saramara is not 13 years and 2 1/4 months, 2 1/3 months, but it's 13 years and 3 months. Are you going to go after Rive? Just because Rive women give birth after could show pregnancy after 3 months. So as Ben Saramara is 13 and 3 months, but there are some women that give. There's a minority of women that can show pregnancy after 2 months, and therefore we should shorten even the period of Ben Sarah Moira because we're trying to kill him. So let's shorten the period to 13 years and 2 1/3 months, because the Torah Ameris the Torah says always find a way to not to kill somebody. And you're telling me to go after Rive? By Dinah Fashis, you don't go after Rive. Adrina Kameh de Ravana. So this question came back to Ravina. Amalei, he said, Ubidini lefashos lo yazrina basa ruba. When it comes to capital punishment cases, you don't decide it after a majority. But Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, if one said the murder happened on the 2nd of the month, and one said the murder happened, one witness said it happened on the 3rd of the month, they're still valid witnesses, because one knew when the month began, and one did not know, so they could be off by a day. If you can tell me you don't go after Rav, maybe they're telling, maybe each one is lying, maybe they're contradicting each other. Maybe they're from the minority that knows when the months begin, when Rosh Chodesh is, and they're actually contradicting each other. So we should not accept their witnesses. So why do we say that even by a capital punishment case, we do accept such witnesses and we kill the Reitzeach? We go after Rav, that most people know will make a mistake. Most people know when it's possible that they didn't have calendars, so most people will make a mistake and not know when the month began. We learned in the Mishnah also the concept of, even by a capital punishment case, you'll go after Rav. How do you know? And we would kill somebody. We say a 3-year-old girl, she gets Kiddushin with Bia. Let's say this 3-year-old girl is married to somebody. We will, whoever has relations with her, will die because she's an Eishes Ish. If any of the erva of the Torah come have relations with her, mumsin olah, they get the death penalty. The Patura, she's Pata because she's a 3-year-old girl. So what the Brisa just said, that a 3-year-old girl that's married to somebody and some strange guy has relations with her, he'll get the death penalty. But wait a second. Just because he's married, she's the 3-year-old girl is married, doesn't mean that the marriage was a valid marriage. We go to Amid Beis. The Ema, let us say that the marriage was a big mistake because she'll turn out to be Ema Islanisu. She'll be somebody who turns out to be an islandist, somebody who can't have children, Leilenu. And he never intended to marry this lady. So it comes out that the person that had relations with her did not have relations with an Ashes Ish. So why are we killing that person? Maybe the woman, it will be from that minority that could be an islandess. And yet we go after Rav and we kill the man that had relations with her. El Rav, it must be that even by a capital punishment case, Zil Basaruba, Rav Nashim Lav, islandess. And most women are not an islandess. And that's another proof that you go after Rav even by a capital punishment case. Says the Gemara, it's not true. My chayv allowed the ketani. What does it mean that he gets chayv? Carbon. She gets a carbon, but we're not going to kill him. We'll make him bring a carbon if he does it by accident. The Mishnah, the Brisa says we kill people who had relations with her. And says the Gemara, the Brisa is talking about that her father was mazana with her. Her father doesn't matter, is not dependent if it's she's married, she's a married woman or not, and therefore her father will always get punished for sleeping with her. Says the Gemara, but it says that even if a stranger sleeps with her, gets the death penalty. But why does the stranger who sleeps with her gets the death penalty? Maybe she'll turn out to be an islandess and she wasn't even married in the first place. Allah, said the Gemara, no, maybe not so. Maybe the Bryce is talking about such a type of husband that when he married her said that even if she turns out to be an islandess, I want this 3-year-old to be my wife. So then she's definitely a wife. And because of that, therefore, if someone else, a stranger, has relations with this 3-year-old, we'll give the death penalty to that 3-year-old. And it's not because Roiv, we go by the Din Nefashis by Roiv. Bottom line over here, after this whole sugya, is that you have to realize that we'll still say we go after Roiv. Most women give birth after 9 months. And because of that, therefore, after 3 months, they start showing that they're pregnant. And since that's the case, Rab Kuspadoy said that the window of a Ben Sarah Murray is from 13 years old to 3 months. And where after 3 months, he could have potentially fathered a child. So therefore, the window of Ben Sarah Murray is from 13 years old to 13 and 3 months. Now the Gemara is back into the discussion of children having fathering. Could they father a child, or do they have any sort of can they have relations with a woman? Tana Rabbanan, strange, crazy case. A woman caused her own son to penetrate her. Somehow her little son, she caused her to penetrate her. So Ben Shammai Oimim Pesalim in Akuhuna. Now she's a Zaina because she had relations with her own son, and she becomes disqualified from Kuhuna. She's a Zaina, she can never marry a Kohen, she can't be with a Kohen, she can't eat Truma. Ubesil Machshirim. Beisila says, since he's under Bar Mitzvah, it's kosher, she remains kosher. It's as if she never had relations with anybody. So Amar Rab Chia Berei the Rabba Bar Nachmeni, Amar Rab Chizda, V'Amila, Amar Rab Chizda, Amar Ze'eri. So Ze'eri explained this. Obviously, a 12-year-old could have relations with a girl, but Hakol Maidim. So everybody would agree. What's the age that will say that his relations is considered an illicit relations? But Ben Taisha Shana B'Yom Echad, everybody agrees a 9-year-old, one day 9-year-old should be Yasei Bia. His relations is a relations. So if he was a boy, was a 9-year-old and had relations with his mother is disqualified from ever eating truma if she was a daughter of a kohen or married to a kohen. Pachas me ben shmeina, if he was 8 years old, everybody agrees, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, she'ein biyasa bia, that of course his relations is not considered relations because maybe he doesn't get an erection or whatever. Loy nechelku, the argument is only elaba ben shmeina, only by 8 years old. If a kid is 8 years old, the Bishame Savre Gamin Medaris Roshanim. We learn from the Chumash and Tanakh that if you make certain cheshbainis, you'll see that earlier ancient times, about 2000 BC, people were giving birth, even the children who were fathers at 8 years old. Well, Beisila says, you can't learn from Tanakh, although you may find it in Tanakh, but it doesn't apply for Bizman Hazeh. An 8-year-old, his bia is not a bia, only if you're 9 years old. Says the Gemara of Darish Hashem and Oland Oiled. How do you know in the previous generations they gave birth at 8 years old? Elam, you're going to say me the ksef. Allah zois b'sheva shonim bas Elam eshes uriyachite balim bas achitov agiloyne v'shlach biad nos navi gshmai yedidya bavi ki Hashem uksiv lishn sayim yom v'hi goyz lafshon uksiv avshon baruch v'ayel kashu v'hi shom shonim uksiv v'yeshiv avshon b'shalayim shn sayim yom v'fnei melch re'ra v'hi mekes amon yavi avshon es melch eichel nom v'sham es nidya shadat l'Hashem chemem uksiv v'achitov v'ra ki loy nesa atzos v'yach v'yisachmar v'yokom v'yelch al beisel ir v'yitzav al beisel v'yechonei. So I'm going to tell you like this. Basically, Bathsheba, the wife of David, had a boy, of course, Shlomo Melech. Shlomo was 7 years old. Shlomo, when he was 7 years old, his grandfather was named Bathsheba's father. Bathsheba had his mother's father was named Eliam, and his grandfather's name was Achitophel. Now, Achitophel hung himself. I mean, he choked himself to death because he joined Avshalom in his rebellion against David. Now, Iksiv, Anshe Dama Miri Alechtzumei, Tanya Koshtosh David, Ein Ela Shloshim Abba, V'Shal Achitophel, Ein Ela Shloshim Shalom. So Achitophel was 33 years old when he choked himself to death, right? Because the Tanakh tells us that he didn't live half the years of a normal lifespan. So it's a 33 years old. At age 33, he had a great grandson. Basically, he had a son, Eliam, right? Achitophel had Eliam, and Eliam had Bathsheba, so his granddaughter was Bathsheba, and his great-grandson was Shlomo, who was 7 years old when he committed suicide, when Achitophel committed suicide. So we'll finish off over here. Kama hava lahu plus shlos. He was 33 when he committed suicide. Dal sheva dahava shlomo. So if you take off 7 years old, Shlomo was 7, Pashlu Eser Mashiach. So when Shlomo was born, Achitophel was 26 years old. When his great-grandson was born, he was 26 years old. Dal tarte shnil tloise iburay. So 2 years you take away for 3 pregnancies. Again, Achitophel having Eliam having Bathsheba, and Bathsheba having Shlomo. So within 24 years, you have 3 pregnancies. 3 people gave birth. It must be that each of them had a child when they were 8 years old. Achitophel, when he was 8 years old, had Eliam. Eliam, when he was 8 years old, had Bathsheba. And Bathsheba, when she had 8 years old, she had Shlomo. And that's how this whole thing makes sense. So you see in Tanakh that young kids were having children. So the Gemara says, "Mimai, not necessarily true. Dilma Tavaya b'teisha oilet. Maybe Achitophel and Eliam had a child at 9 years old, right? Ubatsheva, but Bathsheba herself, Elida b'shis. Bathsheba was giving birth already at 6 years old, and as a girl, they mature faster. Mishum de itze baria, they're healthier, they mature faster. And women mature faster. Teida, I'll prove it to you. The Hal Havalad Miyakara, he must have had a son from before. She had a child even before Shlomo Melech. So anyway, no matter what you say, it seems that Bathsheba, even below 8 years old, she must have been 7 years old, 6 years old when she started having children. So you can't prove from this point that as a male you can have a child at 8 years old. Could be Achitophel and Eliam had children when they were over 9, but Bathsheba had Shlomo Melech when she was under 7 or under 6. You know, she already had a child. So the Gemara is going to try to again prove it from Tanakh that kids are having babies. So we're going to see that more about that tomorrow.